Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name's Christina Kent, and I'm a fine artist based in San Francisco. And in this video, I want to show you a little bit of my process for painting Golden Hour in downtown San Francisco. For this painting, I'm working on panel, and I've already put in the underpainting, so that's where you can see kind of the light and shadow shapes of the painting sketched out in that golden color. And then I go in just filling in the darkest shadows with this dark steely blue color that I've mixed. And I want to keep the shadows this nice dark cool blue because I really want them to contrast against the warm golds that we're going to be bringing in to the parts of the buildings that are being hit by that late afternoon sun, that the last light of day that's just so beautiful and captivating. In some parts, I'm laying the paint on relatively thick, while in other parts, I kind of just gently brush the paint across the canvas to lay down a very light layer of paint. And my idea here is that it'll mix with the subsequent layers that I'm putting down, since I'm going to be working on all of this while the paint is still wet. And I'm not trying to draw every roof or every line that I'm seeing in the city, but just suggest some of the shapes, so the stark contrast of the kind of overhanging rooftops or the lines that kind of separate one building to another. That's just what I'm trying to suggest here without going too much into detail. Once I've put down where I'm seeing the darkest darks in my reference, then I move on to mix a slightly lighter blue color. So I'm keeping it really muted, really cool, but just a slightly lighter value to bring a little bit of variation into the shadow areas. And this blue that I mixed has sort of a greenish tint to it, so I wanted one that also had a slightly purplish tint, just to give some interesting variation in hues in the shadow areas. I pre-mixed a lot of colors for this painting, so I have my cool blues for the shadows, but I also have some nice warm colors to get the effect of the buildings that are getting hit by that direct sunlight. So I start putting in the lighter shadow color I've mixed, and with painting, colors are so relative, so you might put down a color like I did here and realize that it's a little bit off. It's not exactly working with the other colors the way you thought it would. So in these instances, I like to just wipe it off and then mix the right color and start fresh. Once I've got the color mixture to my liking, then I start to fill in that area, adding slight shifts, slight adjustments to each of my color mixtures as I'm sort of blocking in these main zones. Once I've filled in most of the shadow areas with these blues, then I start going to the areas that are getting hit by direct sunlight. So here I'm starting to bring in my warm colors. And as with the shadow areas, I use sort of my darkest colors first, and then I'll layer in or add in some of the lighter tones. And in particular, when I'm painting things at golden hour, I like to make some of I like to sort of put in a layer that is extra dark, maybe extra saturated red or orange, and then lay the highlights, lay the gold appearance directly on top of that, so that then the edges you'll sort of still get some of these deep oranges and reds around the edges of those highlights. So you can see I'm putting in really bright saturated blocks of color, but I'm going to be covering most of that up when I go to add the highlights. And I think it's having the highlight with that bright saturated color right underneath, peeking out just around the edges, that can make the highlight seem extra bright, extra strong, and extra warm. I still haven't blocked in all of the colors at this point, but I want to build up a little bit of the lights, especially on this building, which I feel like is extra bright. So I mix a slightly lighter color with some more white in it, and I'm able to layer that on top of the orange underneath. The last step of the block-in is adding this nice, bright, saturated blue sky to contrast with the orange buildings. Once I finish the block-in, I turn to building up the lights, also adjusting some of the edges and adding texture to the piece. I layer the bright, warm highlights onto the buildings, but I also allow some of the orange to peek through. I also use my palette knife to add texture and break up some of my brush strokes in the foreground. One of my favorite parts about painting cityscapes is trying to simplify really complicated forms, like all of the little highlights on these cars. I think it's so fun to try to figure out how to convey the sense of the form of the cars without painting every little detail. So here's how the final painting turned out. I hope you like it. I'm really happy with how the golden hour glow sort of came together. I feel like I can feel the warmth of these buildings, and it brings me back to the memory when I was walking downtown and seeing this with my own eyes. I also like how the details in the foreground turned out. I feel like you can still get a sense of the cars and the houses with those the variation in light and dark in the foreground, but it's not so stark that it distracts too much from the effect of light. Anyway, that's all I have for today. If you like this video, let me know in the comments below, and feel free to post any questions you have there as well. As always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting this channel and making these videos happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.